Social Studies, question and answer survey MCQ.
Hello everyone, hello. So hello everyone, let's wait for a few people. And then we'll start after. So today we're going to be doing the full social division, SST division for our annual exam. This is not NCERT, so remember that, I already put that in the title. But then still this is helpful as some of the chapters are, most of the chapters are similar to the NCERT, I believe. Okay, so the first chapter that we'll be doing is first chapter is oh no, sorry. Indian national movement and independence. This is our chapter we'll be doing. So let us just wait for another maybe 15 seconds and we can start. Okay, so we'll be starting in 3, 2, 1 and let's go. So, first this chapter begins out with saying or asking, like with defining the meaning of nationalism. Okay? Nationalism. So basically what is nationalism? Nationalism is basically a political ideology that defines the 1 minute. Defines the unity, identity, and sovereignty of a nation. So, let's say to define nationalism, a nation first, you could say a country, but then if you go into the depth, you can say imagine communities. Let's say you are here, let's say this is you. You see another person fall down, you don't know who is this person, who is he and all. But then you go and help him. Why? It's this feeling that all of you or all the individuals that you see around you are all a part of the same community. So, in simple words, nationalism or political community creates a sense of collective identity. Okay, so this and this. Now, who wrote that nations are imagined communities? Who wrote this? You might get a question like this in your exam. So the answer for this is a well-known political theorist, Benedict Anderson, wrote that nations were imagined communities. He, he also wrote that people may not each other. So in the same example, you may not know this dude, you don't have any relation with him, but then when if he falls down and gets injured, you go and help him because it's the feeling that all of you belong to the same community or the same nation or political community. So this nationalism proved to be important. Basically, it was a significant factor. It served as a unifying force of the Indians against the British rule. So it basically united the Indians so that they could demand for independence, the right for self-governance from the people of Britain or the Britishers. So it fostered a sense of pride, collective identity, and ideology and solidarity. And a movement, you don't need to add the end here, movements to create a nation. Now so let's say they ask about what is nationalism, you're supposed to write about all of this. Now, let's move on to the next part. So, basically, I don't need to write that. Nationalism was not just an idea that emerged, it was a part of a journey towards India's independence. And this nationalism emerged due to several activities like protests, revolts, sacrifices, and many more. So, these protests, revolts, and other activities can be classified into revolutionary nationalism, subaltern nationalism, and mainstream nationalism. Now, let us move on to the phases of nationalism portrayed through the Indian national movement led by the INC. Now, so the Indian national movement consists of three phases. The first phase of the Indian national movement, the early nationalists. From 1885, when the Congress was formed, till 1907. So, then the second phase, assertive nationalists, or the radical phase, which was from 1905 to 1918. Then the third phase, or the final phase, which was the mass phase of the Indian national movement, which is from 1919 to 1947, and that's all. The colonial era ended. Now, let's start off with the first phase, or the early nationalists. So, in the early years, the INC was dominated by the early nationalists, and some of them were Sundarnath Banerjee, W.C. Banerjee, M.G. Ranade, Dadabhai Naroji, and Feroze Shah Marwanji Mehta. All of these people were the early nationalists. So, these people were basically the earlier form of Mahatma Gandhi, because they were moderates. They are referred as moderates because of their modest nature of demands and methods. So that's why they were referred to as moderates. They did not want to overthrow the British rule through violence. So violence was not their priority. They chose to present their demands through gentle language, and also through or via peaceful constitutional methods. And okay, I want all of the people in the chat to define what is the meaning of constitutional methods. So, like, what is the meaning of this group of words? Constitutional methods. So, its meaning is basically the use of printed articles, a formal way, printed articles, petitions, and speeches. So all of these come under constitutional methods. So they did not want to overthrow the British rule by violence. They believed that the British would respond to Indian public opinion. What was the demand? They demanded self-government within the British regime. So they did the same thing. They demanded the self-government as well as reforms. Why did they need reforms? They needed reforms to Indianize civil services. So, however, since these people did not involve the masses in their politics, so their achievements or successes were limited. And so, now remember I was speaking about a person named Dadabhai Naroji. Dadabhai Naoroji is from 1825 to 1917. He is one of the key early nationalist leaders and he served thrice as the president of the Congress. So he played a key role. He was intelligent. He exposed. He published a book called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. This book exposed the harsh economic impact of the British rule on agriculture, which resulted in poverty, migration, and also lack of production in industries. So he used a theory called the drain. This is a very important thing: drain of wealth theory, to expose the entire harsh economic impact, so and so what I told. Then, in order to solve this problem, he needed reforms of economic policies such as lowering of land revenues, abolition of salt tax, and protection of Indian industries. Now, let us move on to the assertive nationalists, which is the second phase of the Indian national movement. So, since these people or these moderates, by the last decade of the 19th century, the influence of these early nationalist leaders, early nationalist leaders started to wane. Wane means like it started to wear out or decrease basically. So like people lost confidence in them, saying that these people would not demand for independence, they would not succeed. And this resulted in limited achievements in moderate politics. Moderate is the nature. So that is why this phase was the early nationalist phase was completely unsuccessful. Not completely, but then it did not show much of a delta or a change. So that is why this resulted in a radical turn in the Congress. This phase is known as the assertive nationalist or the radical phase. So, assertive nationalism developed under the leadership of Bipin Chandra Pal from Bengal, Lala Lajpat Rai from Punjab, and lastly we have Bal Gangadhar Tilak from Maharashtra. All of them together basically led the assertive nationalism. These people criticized the early nationalists for their methods of prayers, petitions, and their faith in the British sense of justice. So like they thought, why do you need these prayers and petitions? You're supposed to use radical methods like boycotts and demonstrations, so that then only you can teach the British a lesson, and then they will leave India. So what they thought, which obviously did not happen, but still it had a major effect. So on the British sense of justice, so they criticized them, saying that these methods won't work. For God's sake, so you're supposed to use the methods, radical methods, and agitations, or radical and agitational methods, which included boycotts of British institutions.
అండ్ ఈ వీడియో నచ్చితే లైక్ చేయండి, షేర్ చేయండి, సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేయండి తప్పకుండా.
Boycotts of British institutions, which include schools, colleges, courts, offices. Then we have mass demonstrations and many more. The main objective was to gain full independence by involving the masses, and this is best articulated by Tilak's statement, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. So because of this statement, people honored him with the title of Lokmanya, and that is why he is known as Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. So, in order to mobilize the people or encourage the people, Bal Gangadhar Tilak had started the Shivaji and the Ganapati festivals in Maharashtra. So, now the British responded to this with such a policy that the tensions because of that are still visible even today. So, this is the partition of Bengal. I mean, it's not visible today, a little, like maybe 3 decades ago. The partition of Bengal, which took place in 1905. Viceroy Lord Curzon, who was from 1899 to 1905, he partitioned Bengal in 1905. So, during the time, Bengal, I believe, which looks like this. So sorry guys if I did it wrong, but it looks kind of like this. No, but earlier it was the largest province and also the richest in British India. It was the richest during the Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar. It was a little even at the time of the partition. India, it comprised the parts of Orissa, a little, not the entire thing. Then we have Bihar, and then parts of Assam. It actually covers the entire Orissa. Yeah, it did. So, now, the British actually, what they told to the public or revealed to the public was that the British divided Bengal on the basis of administrative convenience, which is apparent. Administrative convenience, but the real motive was to weaken the Bengali nationalists who had a stronghold in Calcutta. So, like, you remember when the first session of the Congress in 1885, it took place in Calcutta. A.O. Hume and everyone. W.C. Banerjee was the president. So, at the time, it took the main headquarters, as you call today, were there in Calcutta. So that's why the real motive was to weaken the Bengali nationalists and Indian National Congress, which had a stronghold in Calcutta. So that is the reason they partitioned Bengal. And on 16th of October 1905, this partition came into effect. So many people observe this day as a day of mourning. Instead of weakening them, it actually did the opposite. It united them in an anti-partition struggle, and all of them protested against the British to stop this partition. There were many agitational methods, and this agitation came to be known as the Swadeshi movement. And it was the strongest in Bengal, but later it spread to Maharashtra, Madras, and Punjab. So now what were the aspects of the actions of the people during the Swadeshi movement? First, people used petitions the normal way, petitions, then meetings, public meetings, and also protests to oppose the partition. But then this later gave way to new methods of protest called or mass mobilization called boycott and Swadeshi. This is important, so just put it as some symbol, or just put hashtag SST. There are many hashtags SST which I didn't put. If you want, I can provide you all of this, but it looks really scattered right now because I'm just using this to explain. But then if you want, I can prepare the notes for this chapter, of course, because we'll be covering most of SST today. Then we'll be doing SST tomorrow as well, most probably. Then we have English. Then later we'll do science, maths, but for the next generation, because for many people, the annual exams might be over by March, by this Friday. So yes. Now let's continue. The second point is self-reliance. Atma Shakti was also promoted. One minute, guys, I'll just. Okay. I'll pause the live stream. Alright, let us continue. So they promoted self-reliance or Atma-Shakti by setting up schools, colleges, and educational slash economic. Wait, I just put it in programs and setting up of village organizations were the main actions. Then many people used boycott. They boycotted schools, British institutions, goods and British goods and institutions like schools, colleges, and then many others. Right? Schools, colleges, and all of them. Schools, colleges, courts, offices, and then British goods. Public bonfires of British goods were all common. They used khadi, indigenous goods as well. Then foreign, they picketed foreign goods as well. And then uh, cultural activities, religious melas, and theatres were all used to spread the message of the Swadeshi. Rabindranath Tagore had sung a song in Bengali called Amar Sonar Bangla, and his nephew Abanindranath Tagore, this is Rabindranath, his painting of Bharat Mata were all important in mobilizing the people. Then we had several other leaders like Aurobindo. He suggested the use of revolutionary violence to overthrow British rule in India. To overthrow the British rule in India. This Swadeshi movement had, however, declined in 1908 due to state repression. Then the partition was revoked in 1911 due to other political pressures. Now let us move on to other advancements in national politics. So, the formation of the Muslim League in 1906. Okay, so basically the British intention of introducing a representative government, and in India also alarmed the Muslims that they feared that INC and Hindu majority would dominate such a government, and so therefore that is why a couple of Nawabs and Muslim landlords had all got together and formed the Muslim League in Dhaka in 1906. Okay, so continuing in Dhaka in 1906. So the main aims of the league were to preach loyalty to the British, then to listen to the British, or to yeah, that's one loyalty, to reserve separate electorates for the Muslims, and to reserve separate electorates for the Muslims, and to protect the rights and the interests of the Muslims. The next event following this was the Congress split at Surat in 1907. So, tensions between the early nationalists and the assertive nationalists re-emerged during the Swadeshi movement. This is because the early nationalists, they opposed the boycott method and the extension of the Swadeshi movement beyond Bengal. So this led to a Congress split at Surat in 1907, where assertive nationalists were expelled out of the Congress. They were removed from the Congress, and then the early nationalists dominated the Congress until the Lucknow Pact of 1916 had reunited them. So, the next one that we have following this event is the Molly Minto Reforms, or the Government of India Act. Molly Minto Reforms. So, what were the Molly Minto Reforms? It was the other name was the Government of India Act. It took place in 1909. Oh no, my pen went flying. Oh no. Yeet. Okay, so what were the Molly Minto reforms? The Molly Minto reforms were basically launched by the British, or the British government, so they could win the support of the Muslim leaders. Why? How? Because you remember the aims of this Muslim League: to preach loyalty to the British, to protect the rights and interests of the Muslims, to reserve separate electorates. All of these needs were fulfilled by these Molly Minto reforms. They got separate electorates, and so they did win the support of the Muslim leaders, and they got separate electorates. However, this system of separate electorates hampered efforts to unite people. Then let's move on to the next one, which is revolutionary nationalism. What was revolutionary nationalism? Till now, you have noticed only Swadeshi movements, boycotts, peaceful methods, radical methods like mass demonstrations, which did not involve real violence, like killing of people. On the other side, on the opponent side, like the killing of Britishers. However, now, due to many failures in demanding freedom, like let's say this is a car called Peaceful Methods. This car suddenly drifted and took a U-turn, and went onto the revolutionary side in 1908. Basically, this is India, Indian people, Indian activists. Hello, hello, Manas. Yeah, you're doing emojis, okay? Hello. What are you doing? Okay, so hello. So yeah, this it started in 1908. Because what was this revolution in nationalism? You may ask. What is this revolutionary nationalism? You may ask. Basically, it is not radical methods, nor mass demonstrations. Teach in Hindi. I'm sorry, no. I mean, wait. I can, but I'm not fluent in English, so that's why no. Many people prefer English. So radical methods. So radical methods is here. So basically, we have no radical methods, no mass demonstrations, no boycotts, just complete freedom. Not NCERT. This is from Footprints. It is a chapter called Indian National Movement and Independence. Alright, this is complete freedom through individual action, individual violent action, and sacrifice. Okay. Yes, it is an 8th chapter. So, individual acts, violent action, and sacrifice. So, these people were inspired by the methods used by Irish and Russian revolutionaries. And an example of the Russian revolutionary is Vladimir on 13. No, just Vladimir Lenin. No, I'm not. Okay. I can't read it. It is just. I already said it. Vladimir Lenin. So he is a Russian revolutionary, and Vladimir Lenin, of course, he led the Bolsheviks and against the Czarist regime or the Czarist government, and so thus therefore we have this Vladimir Lenin as a good example who popularized socialist ideas. And that is why this led to the popularization of socialism. They embraced ideas of socialism. And so then let's move on to the reasons why revolutionary nationalism had taken place. Reasons are: 1. People were frustrated with the early nationalist politics and the monumental reforms. Then failure of the assertive nationalists to organize a proper Swadeshi movement. Many peasants and Muslims did not join the movement. And finally, state repression like banning of Samitis, public meetings in Bengal. Many assertive nationalist leaders like B.G. Tilak and Lala Lajpat Rai were jailed or deported. So, some incidences of revolutionary nationalism are: 1. People can Prafulla Chakki. This is very important. Remember all these names that I'm going to list. Prafulla Chakki and Khudiram Bose. In April of 1908, Prafulla Chakki and Khudiram Bose had wounded the viceroy. Not the viceroy, British judge in Muzaffarpur, and Prafulla Chakki shot himself dead while Khudiram Bose was jailed and hanged. The second one is Rush Behari Bose and Sachin Sanyal. These two people basically wounded the viceroy Lord Hadringe in a bomb attack in 1912 at Delhi. The third one is Anushilan Samiti and Abhinav Bharat. Anushilan Samiti from Bengal and Abhinav Bharat from Maharashtra. Both of them were secret societies that trained the youth against the British rule. Then the fourth one is the Yugantar Society, led by Jatindranath Mukherjee. This also did the same thing. It trained the youth, and it was a secret society. Main thing is that it established contacts with foreign revolutionaries or international revolutionaries. The fifth one is V.D. Savarkar. I mean, you must be surprised when you hear Savarkar, because Savarkar was basically, along with Nathuram Godse, they all planned for assassination of Gandhi. But Savarkar was not a direct part of it. Sorry, he was the planner. V.D. Savarkar and Shamji Krishnavarma. They operated the India House in London. Just kidding, it's London. Okay. Then we have Har Dayal. These people who operated the Gadar Revolution Party in North America. So these people started parties outside India so that they could escape persecution. And then we move on to the sixth one, which are newspapers like Jugantar and Sandhya spread the message of Indian nationalism, freedom struggle. Then we had Bande Mataram. And Gadar. And these two newspapers were printed abroad so that they could escape censorship in India. However, revolutionary nationalism was crushed by the British because these small secret societies were suppressed by the British. Then we have we enter into the time of the First World War, the Home Rule League movement in 1916. Basically, like during the First World War from 1914 to 1918, I mean, there was a radicalized Indian politics because there was an expectation the British would grant independence because of Indian support in the war. But however, that was not the case. So because of that, since when British made no such assurances, all the INC ministries resigned in protest, and mainly Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Independence means self-governance, okay? Yes? Yes, Manas. Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant. Yeah, sure, go ahead. And Annie Besant from 1847 to 1933 started the home ruling movement because they put forward the demands. What do you mean by 8th chapter? And then in which book? No, I am not NCRT. No, see, I am not NCRT. If I was NCRT, I would definitely teach you. But then I was not NCRT. So I'm so sorry. India, of course, India. But then our school uses a different book called Footprints, which I mentioned, not NCRT. So that's why. Alright, let me continue with this. Rani Besant in 1847. By each chapter, do you mean colonial era in India? If there is a chapter, then I could teach that. I'll be teaching that later. It will be the chapter that I'll be teach is a little similar in that. By each chapter, do you mean colonial era in India? Do you mean colonial era in India? Just tell me that for a minute. Colonial era in India about Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar. Okay. Fine. So Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant 1847 to 1933. Okay. So they both led this home rule league movement and put forward the demands for self-governance. What is the name of the chapter at least? Could you tell me that? No. So, alright, good night. Then we have Montagu, Chelmsford, reforms. It is in 1919. So this is also known as the Government of India Act, even though there might be some confusion with the Moli-Minter reforms. So basically, the purpose of this act was to grant certain concessions to nationalist demands, but then it did not meet the expectation of the Indian nationalists or politicians. Yeah, I believe I don't have the chapter. So to grant certain concessions to nationalist demands. So that is why the legislature, and the executive, the judiciary, like they granted some responsibilities through that, but however still it wasn't enough on the expectations of the Indian nationalists, and that is why they did not follow this and they still protested. Then comes the mass phase of the Indian national movement from 1919 to 1947. So from the 1920s, which ends in 1940s, India entered a completely new phase of politics that is also called as the mass phase of the Indian national movement. So this mass phase, basically, in the earlier phases, all these nationalist movements were led by educated people from Bombay, Bengal, and Madras. But now this mass phase was headed by all sections of people, like workers, peasants, tribes, and all of them joined the freedom struggle. All of this is because of one man named Mahatma Gandhi. He united the people from all walks of life, inspired them to join the freedom struggle. So first, Mahatma Gandhi. After Mahatma Gandhi had returned back from South Africa in 1915, he led successful protests in support of the peasants He had successful. 1 minute, guys. There is some dust on my. Okay, yeah. He had certain successful protests in support of the peasants in Champaran, Kheda, and Ahmedabad. And he emerged as a popular leader. A really popular leader. And then Mahatma Gandhi offered a new method of protest called Satyagraha / Truth Force, which included non-violent methods like picketing of markets selling foreign goods or British goods. And he also launched several social reform campaigns like to abolish untouchability, for the abolition of untouchability, to uplift women, and to economically revive villages. Then we had the Rowlatt Satyagraha. So what was the Rowlatt Act? The Rowlatt Act was basically an act or a law that increased the police powers of the British so that they could arbitrarily arrest the people. Arrest the people without any reason. So this was a really unfair act, and that is why Mahatma Gandhi called in for an all India non-violent hardtail on strike on 6th of April 1919. But then the British responded with brutal state repression on 13th of April 1919. And then the Mahatma Gandhi called off the movement in Amritsar in Punjab. Mahatma Gandhi had called off the movement due to the outbreak of violence. But then the Rowlatt Act was important as it marked a shift towards mass politics. Then we have the Khilafat agitation. I'll just write from this side. The Khilafat agitation and cooperation movement from 1920 to 22. After the First World War, the British had imposed a harsh treaty on the Turkish Sultan, who was called the Khalifa. But then this outraged the Indian Muslims because the Khalifa was also the spiritual head. The Sultan was also the spiritual head of the Muslims, or the Khalifa. So that is why they started this movement called the non-cooperation movement. The Khilafat agitation and non-cooperation movement to restore the Turkish leaders or rulers' authority over the Muslim holy places. So the Turkish ruler then the leaders Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali had demanded for the INC for a full-fledged non-cooperation and boycott movement. And then Mahatma Gandhi saw this as an opportunity to unite the Hindus and the Muslims against the British rule in India. And so this had helped a lot, and the Indians agreed, and this resulted in the non-cooperation movement being launched on September 4th, 1920 to redress the Punjab wrong, the Khilafat wrong, and to demand Swaraj. Now, the incidences are the same as the incidences of the Swadeshi movement. Only new thing is that some of the leaders like Motilal Nehru, Aruna Asaf Ali, and C.R. Das had gave up their legal practices. Then there were council elections were boycotted. Many peasants had launched like no revenue campaigns from like Patidar peasants from Kerala, Gujarat had launched no revenue campaigns without the approval of the INC, and many more people. Then peasants and Adivasis in the Guntur district had launched forest satyagrahas, even though it was not a part of the program. Now, let's move on. Then after that, we have revival of revolution and nationalism, which had taken place because see the Chauri Chaur incident, which was an incident where the peasants had killed 22 policemen in the Gorakhpur district, had like caused an effect on Gandhi that people were not ready for normal and struggle. So he called up the movement. This resulted in many revolutionary nationalists being angry and upset because they thought that the non-cooperation movement was their to main guide to freedom, but then no, because they called it off, and then this was really bad, and then they felt no, this is not the way. Violent methods is the only way, and then they took violence. Example, we have Jatin Das, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, and Chandrasekhar Azad are all examples of prominent revolutionaries. Some of the incidences were robbing of trains at Kakori by Ram Prasad Bismil, Rajendra Lahiri, and Ashfaq Khan. They were arrested and hanged. Then Surya Sen's group raiding the Chittagong Army group, and they were Surya Sen was in 1930. Surya Sen was arrested and hanged in 1934, and then so on. Main one was members of the HSRA killed Saunders, British commissioner, did a charge that caused the death of Lala Lajpat Rai, a head wound. Then we have members of the HSRA like Bhagat Singh and Batkeshwar Datta, who threw a bomb in the Central Legislative Assembly. And then Bhagat Singh was arrested for this and his and other conspiracies. The 23-year-old Bhagat Singh and his allies were executed. Jatin Das started a hunger strike in jail for better treatment of political prisoners. Again, he died after 63 days of fast in September of 1929. But the bomb case of Central Legislative Assembly took place on 8th April 1929. Then we have the civil disobedience movement. The civil disobedience movement is also known as the movement for Purna Swaraj, which started on 12th of March 1930 by Mahatma Gandhi through the launch of the Salt Satyagraha or Gandhi's Dandi March. So basically, even though salt was available to everyone, but then the British had found out that salt was a really important item in Indian food, so they imposed taxes on salt, and this resulted in many poor people not being able to afford salt. But then this had resulted in a lot of rampage because salt was a really important item. So then Gandhi chose to break this law because salt was an item that is used by all sections of people and he can unite them in the freedom struggle. So that is why this movement was the civil disobedience movement, and on his 387-kilometer long march, he was joined by more than 80 of his followers, and then he defied the salt law by going to Dundee, the coastal village from Sabarmati Ashram, and by picking up dried salt from the Arabian Sea and boiling seawater to make salt. Then this movement witnessed more participation than earlier movements because even many women had joined the struggle. Peasants and workers had already joined in the non-cooperation movement. So this movement was led by different leaders in different places. If you look at the Afghan province or the Northwest province, we have Frontier Gandhi or Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who led this movement. And then we have Rani Gaidinliu, who also from Manipur, who also joined the struggle. So all of these movements that took place, which resulted in the British worrying, and they passed constitutional reforms through three roundtable conferences. Congress called off the civil disobedience movement and joined the second roundtable conference. But then there was no agreement on India's political future. Then Gandhi renewed the civil disobedience movement. However, again, the British, whether or not it was worried at the first, it responded with brutal repression, and the Congress withdrew the movement in 1934. Then we have the Quit India movement of 1942, because the Quit India movement was also started during the First World War, which is the Second World War from 1939 to 1945, because in September of 1939, the British hired Indian soldiers against the war against Germany, but then he did not take permission or consult the Indian leaders before doing this. The NC leaders said, yes, of course, we will offer you support, but then you should promise us to give us full independence after the war. But then the British made no such assurances, which resulted in INC ministries resigning in protest. And then that is why all the INC leaders and India's economic situation had worsened, and India faced the threat of Japanese invasions. So thus, therefore, because of this, Gandhi gave the Quit India resolution: do or die in the fight against the British. We shall either free India or die in the attempt. We shall not live to see the perpetuation of our slavery. That's what Gandhi said on 8th of August 1942. And many of these leaders were jailed before the movement was even officially launched, but the movement had spread. Now, when Gandhi was there, the problem was, it was not a problem, but he mostly supported non-violent methods. But then now Gandhi was jailed. So because of that, the movement erupted into violence and people took matters into their own hands. Torture also became a part of the movement. Then many people had also formed independent governments in Satara and Awadh. So, Usha Mehta was a 22-year-old college student who ran the underground Congress radio to inspire the people. However, by 1943, this movement ceased or was ruthlessly suppressed by the British, even though sources say it continued till 1944 as an underground movement led by Jayaprakash Narayan and Ram Manohar Lohia. So, now let us move on. We have INA and Subhash Chandra Bose. So Subhash Chandra Bose was also a radical nationalist. He joined the Congress, but then he left it in 1921 because he had ideological differences with Mahatma Gandhi. He did not support Ahimsa. He formed the All India Forward Bloc in 1939. He attempted to free India when World War II had broke out, and then by creating an armed alliance with Japan. There he went to Calcutta. From there he went to Singapore, and then he formed the INA or the Azad Hind Fauj, which it also contained a women's regiment named after Rani Ki Jhansi, the Rani of Jhansi. He gave his famous call Delhi Chalo and declared war on Britain, but however it failed. By failing, it also invoked great pride among the Indians. The INA members were put on public trial, but people all over India had protested the trials. Then we are towards independence and partition. Towards the 1940s, like India's independence was around the corner, Muslims from the Muslim League became anxious about the fate of the Muslims in India. So that is why they began seeing Hindus and Muslims as two separate nations, and they put forward the demand for Pakistan. So this demand arose since the 1930s when the British had partitioned Bengal, and also due to religious tensions between the Hindus and the Muslims in Bengal due to the policy of divide and rule. So then the demand for Pakistan was put forward when the British had began negotiations for independence. Later, we had the Cabinet Mission Plan in 1946, and the British sent this cabinet to India to work out a political structure. And they said that India would be a federation comprising of princely states and British India, and also with some autonomy for Muslim majority provinces. But then the League rejected this demand. Before that, the Congress was like, fine, I'll offer conditional support, form an interim government, and then draft a constitution for a free India. But then the Muslim League did not follow this because it rejected the demand of Pakistan. All the ministries had also resigned, they protested, and the violence had spread to too many parts of North India. And amidst this violence, the British wanted to get into this deadlock, so that is why they sent Lord Louis Mountbatten, as the new viceroy to India to transfer power at the earliest. He discussed it with Indian leaders and said that partition on alone could save India from chaos. So he said that India would be freed, but two nations, India and Pakistan, would be created. Princely states could choose to either join India or Pakistan or remain independent. The formal transfer of power would occur on 15th of August 1947. Then, the name Pakistan means land of the pure, covered by Chaudhry Rahmat Ali in 1933 in his pamphlet titled Now or Never. It comprised of the five northern provinces, the Afghan province, the first Pakistan, Kashmir, Punjab, the northwestern province of the Afghan province, Kashmir, um, Sindh and Balochistan. The letter I was incorporated to ease the pronunciation. Then partition was one of the largest migrations in human history, but hundreds of thousands of people were killed, women faced brutality. So the India's freedom came at the cost of partition. Now, that's it for this lesson, but not for the video. So we'll pause the video because we have run for 1 hour 14 minutes and 42. Then later we'll start with USA, a brief history. So I'll pause. I'll keep it aside for this until then. So hello everyone, again we're back. So we'll be doing USA, a brief history. So the USA is a really is the fourth largest country. We all know that, but it has a deep history, which is similar to India's about colonialism. So the USA had a war known as the American Revolution or the American War of Independence and the Civil War period. So it is categorized into two periods, which is in the 1700s and this one in, okay, I'll write it in centuries, in the 18th century, late, mid 18th century, early to late, then Civil War, the 19th century. The main part was in the late, late 19th centuries. But then it started from a long time. First, let's look at the American Revolution. What was the American Revolution? Why was it called? So, when the British came to America, it conquered 13 colonies. It conquered a large part of it, but the main parts were the 13 colonies. And each of these colonies had its own assembly of elected representatives. But however, these people were controlled by the British. But then we also have another. The people who settled in these colonies were independent and resourceful. They made huge profits. They were prosperous. They had a flourishing. They had a flourishing trade. However, the problem was the British wanted all these profits. So they thought that the profits made by these colonies rightfully belonged to Great Britain, and so that is why they started doing the same thing that they did to India, imposing taxes, heavy laws, massacres. So that is why the colonists, so as they were doing this by 1763, they conquered vast parts of North America. But then the colonists, the British, thought that the colonists would contribute towards the defense of their territories. However, they in turn demanded the right of representation in the British Parliament. And they took up the slogan, "No taxation without representation." So, now the colonists were basically infuriated by this taxes imposed by the British, and so therefore they began boycotts and protests. Now, similar to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, on 5th of March 1770, a large mob of colonists gathered around a group of British soldiers in Boston. Alright? So the soldiers fired into the crowd and then killing civilians. And this event came to be known as the Boston Massacre. And there are many people who died in this war, especially a 12-year-old. I think 12, lower than 12 or 10 something, but then between 10 to 13. So his name is Christopher. He died during the war. And so the Boston Massacre was a really bad event. So after this Boston Massacre, the colonists intensified the demand of the right to govern themselves. They stated that the British laws were oppressive and they had lost the right to govern their colonies. Now, the intolerable acts. What were the intolerable acts? So, the British passed several punitive laws. Hello, class 9. Oh, wow, nice. Okay, this is class 8. Fine, we're class 8th grade social. The British passed several punitive laws, all of them which came to be known as the Intolerable Acts. So why were these intolerable acts passed? Because to punish the people of Massachusetts for their actions during the Boston Tea Party, which took place. Thank you. Boston Tea Party in 1773. So these intolerable acts were really harsh, and what they did was the East India Company or the EIC closed the Boston Harbor.
హాయ్ అండి, వీడియో నచ్చితే లైక్ చేయండి, షేర్ చేయండి, సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేయండి.
The EIC was repaid for its losses. Now, the next one or the event was the first Continental Congress. What was the first Continental Congress? The first Continental Congress was a meeting that took place in September of 1774. Why? Because the representatives or the delegates of 12 colonies met at a convention in Philadelphia. So the meeting was called to discuss about how should the people react to the intolerable acts, and so therefore the Congress decided to pull a full-fledged boycott and ban of British goods and a ban on all trade with Britain if the latter refused to repeal the intolerable acts. Then the first Continental Association was also established to effectively carry out the embargo. Now, beginning of military hostilities. So this was marked by several battles between the British, and because when the British forces clashed with the people of Massachusetts, the colonists formed their own army, united to form their own army, and they chose George Washington as their commander in chief. And commander in chief. Now, in April of 1775, two battles took place. They were the battles of Lexington and the battles of Concord. This happened when the British sent a force into Concord. They clashed with the colonial militia. Now, the next one was in June of 1775, the Battle of Bunker Hill took place. The Battle of Bunker Hill took place. Now, later the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was also formed by a committee that was elected by these delegates. It consisted of people like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, and Robert R. Livingston. So all these people had together organized themselves into a committee to prepare a declaration of independence. Then, so the Declaration of Independence was drafted and finally adopted on 4th of July 1776. This was a revolutionary document. It informed the people saying that they could free themselves from also the British rule. They could free themselves from also the British rule and form their own government. So that is why the 4th of July is celebrated as Independence Day in the USA. Then we shall go on or continue with the policies in the Declaration of Independence. Its main ideal was all men are created equal. Like all of them were equal. It was based on the principle of the government by the consent of the governed, which at that point of time was not practiced by the government of any other country except for India. So now let's move on to the Treaty of Paris in 1783. So the Treaty of Paris was signed between the British and the American colonies. The independence of 13 colonies were recognized and they went on to become the USA officially. Now, if you look at George Washington, he was elected as the president unanimously as the first president in 1789. As the first president of the USA in 1789. Now, the American Constitution had adopted the Bill of Rights in 1791, and this was the role model for several other constitutions in the world. Now we're moving to a completely different phase in American history called the American Civil War, which lasted from April of 1861 to April of 1865. So, what is the American Civil War? It was a war that was caused due to slavery, and it was a result of the conflict between the northern and the southern states of America. It was fought to uphold the principles of equality and liberty and justice. Equality, liberty, and justice. So, many people had fought this war and many people had died. So, first, let's go to the beginning of the war. So, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution in England in the 18th century, if we look at it, at the time there was a great demand for raw cotton, which became very profitable. So there was also more and more plant, like this is because in the southern states or the southern part of North America, southern states, they are turned towards the plantation estates and slavery. However, the northern states, on the other hand, focused on industrialization, manufacturing, trade, and many more. So, these slaves in the southern states were mostly African Americans who were considered as a viable form of cheap labor. Now, so by the mid 19th century, slavery was abolished throughout the British Empire. Many of the northern states did not require slave labor at all, so they began to strongly oppose or disapprove the concept of slavery. Now, this resulted in many anti-slavery movements launched in the northern states or mostly in America. Now, let us look at some of the causes of the Civil War. These anti-slavery movements, just like in India, when you look at the non-cooperation movements and all helped contribute to the final independence. Similarly, anti-slavery movements contributed to a war called the American Civil War. Now, several other factors have also contributed to it. First, we have northern versus southern interests. The northern states, as I already told you, its economic nature was mostly industries and factories, but however, the southern states were dependent on the exclusive culture of the slave owners and the plantation estates. Then there were also different. These differences in economic activity had resulted in differences in the culture, worldview between the two regions. So they did not agree on a number of issues, including slavery. Yes, for funny face. So, alright. Now the anti-slavery movements, as I told you, they were launched in in the northern states by the late 19th century and all. So basically, they demanded the abolition of slavery because the Southerners, they were very cruel with the slaves because they treated them really unjustly. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 gave slave owners the freedom or a great latitude in traveling to the north to capture any escaped slaves. However, this act was largely unpopular with the anti-slavery activists on the forces of the South. Now, sympathies began to grow for the abolition movements or these abolitionists. This happened after the publishing of Harriet Beecher Stowe's book Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. So many of these people, like, it highlighted the evils of slavery, and it also made a huge change in the way Northerners viewed slavery, and it helped cause and contribute to the outbreak of the Civil War, and helped cause further the cause of abolition, and many more. So the southern states, however, threatened with the prospect of having to either stop slavery or come to the war. They either would come to the war or they either threatened to secede or break away from the Union. So now the election of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the USA. So he opposed slavery because slavery was a really unjust practice and was again absolutely against the American principles of democracy, which stated that all men were created equal. And this was written by Thomas Jefferson, even though he owned 400 slaves. He only freed five slaves, even though he accepted his mistake, which was really bad. And so with his election, South Carolina broke away from the Union, and then we have 10 more states each year, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. All of them broke away from the Union, and these states together formed the Confederate States of North America, with Jefferson Davis as its president in 1861. Now, and again, Abraham Lincoln and other members of the Republican Party, they were like, no, of course I wouldn't let it break away. Similarly, the way Gandhi did not want the partition to take place, the same thing had happened here. However, this time it was like a success. I mean, they did not break away, not like in the case of India. So, Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party led to the American Civil War in April of 1861 started, and then to bring back the southern states into the fold of the Union. So this war lasted from April of 1861 to April of 1865. During this time, 6 lakh soldiers fighting for both sides were killed. Several others were wounded. And so, but however, still in September of 1864, the northern states gained the upper hand, ultimately leading to their victory in April of 1865. So The end of the Civil War was marked by the surrender of General Robert Edward Lee at the Appomattox Courthouse of a really funny name for which I gave hippopotamus. Lee at the Appomattox Courthouse. Appomattox Courthouse. And then Abraham Lincoln also abolished slavery in the South and declared the Southern states free from slavery with his Proclamation of Emancipation, a title that won him the Great Emancipator. He wanted to institute a liberal system to reconstruct the South, but however, it wasn't a reality. He was assassinated in 1865 for the abolition of slavery, but then military rule was instituted in the South and the reconstruction of the southern states ended in 1876. So, alright, we finished this lesson. Okay, so then we will continue with the next lesson. We'll continue with the next lesson. Like maybe we'll just pause for give a break of 10 minutes. Sorry, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Then again, we'll start the next lesson. Okay guys, so from now on we'll be basically doing the MCQs from the rest of the chapters. The next chapter is USA, Geographical Features. We'll have MCQ Geographical Features. So the first question is, the river Rio Grande. The river Rio Grande forms the boundary between the USA and and the first option is Mexico, the second option is Canada, and the third option is Alaska. The answer is Mexico. The Rockies are dash mountains. A. Youngfold, B. Block, C. Volcanic. The answer is Youngfold. The third one. The Grand Canyon has been formed by the river A. Colorado, B. Rio Grande, C. Sacramento. The answer is Colorado. Lakes Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario form the dash lakes. Great Lakes, Large Lakes, Majestic Lakes. The answer is Great. Mojave and Sonoran are dash. A. Deserts, B. Lakes, C. Rivers. The answer is deserts. Fill in the blanks. A deep narrow valley formed by a river is called as a gorge or a canyon. The answer is canyon, of course. Mount Dash is the highest peak in the USA. The answer is Mount McKinley. Anyone there? Anyone need polls? We'll try to create a poll. So I have the live chat next to me right here now. So yeah, anybody can chat out and then say the answers. I want to create a poll. Next one. The state of Hawaii is a group of dash islands. The answer is volcanic islands. The temperate grasslands of the USA are called the dash. They are the prairies. Now, state whether the following statements are true or false. Rewrite the corrected statement. The southeastern coast of the USA receives a lot of rainfall. That is true, because if you look at Florida and all, you notice that they receive rainfall from the northeastern trades, which blow over the Atlantic Ocean. So therefore that is correct or true. And the Gulf Plains as well. Now, assertion and reason. Assertion A. Alaska has a cold polar climate. Reason R. It is situated at a very high altitude. So you must have learned in the chapter in your social science chapter or maybe your physics chapter that as the altitude increases, the temperature decreases, i.e. the temperature is inversely proportional to the altitude, and so therefore the answer is A, because it's correct. Now, answer the following questions in brief. The first one, where are the Hawaii Islands situated? So, Hawaii is basically a group of volcanic islands, an archipelago of 8 main islands and numerous islets in the Pacific Ocean. Alright, so they are volcanic islands, a group of 8 islands. That's what you're supposed to write. So, 2. Name the highest and the most rugged range of the Western Islands. So, the highest and the most rugged range of the Western Islands are the Rockies. The Rockies are the easternmost part of the Western Islands, and they have an average elevation of about 2,500 meters to 4,000 meters, making them the highest and the most rugged ones. Now, let us move on to the third question. What is Piedmont? Piedmont is basically a fall and drop region. If you have noticed, the eastern highlands on the Appalachians, as they descend, several rivers that they flow down here, they actually drop down in cascades or in rapids and falls before they flow into the Atlantic coastal plain and so into the Atlantic Ocean. And so this drop region is called as the Piedmont. Now, we'll go on to the answer in detail. Give an account of the deserts in the USA. So, there are 4 main deserts in the USA, which are the Great Basin. It's a cold temperate desert located in the Western Highlands with an average elevation of about 915 meters to 2000 meters. Then after that we have the Mojave Desert, the subtropical Mojave Desert. It is located in southeastern California, southern Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. Then we have the northern half of the tropical Sonoran Desert, which is located in southern California, western and Arizona. And then we also have the tropical Chihuahuan Desert that is found in southwestern parts of the USA and the northern parts of Mexico, southeastern. Okay, now we are great. This chapter is basically a really easy chapter. So, I mean, easy if you. It's a really interesting chapter. Now, let's go on with some of the MCQs in this chapter. Okay, so in Alaska, dash and dash are the main rivers that drain into the Bering Sea or the Pacific Ocean. I'll repeat the question. In Alaska, dash and dash are the main rivers which drain into the Bering Sea / Pacific Ocean. We need answers. We can have answers now in the chat. Anybody, we can get the answers. The question is, in Alaska, dash and dash are the 2 main rivers which drain into the Bering Sea or the Pacific Ocean. The answer is Yukon and Kuskokwim. Dash, the second question. Dash is the other name for the Eastern Highlands. I repeat it. Dash is the other name for the Eastern Highlands. The answer is the Appalachian Highlands. Okay, so next one. Dash River drains north into the Prudhoe Bay or the Arctic Ocean. One hint is that this river is located in Alaska. Dash again, so Dash River drains north into the Prudhoe Bay / Arctic Ocean. The answer is the Colville River. The next question is Dash is a large waterway project that is operated jointly by USA and Canada. Hint: this helps to bring large ocean liners to reach the North American hinterlands. Large ocean liners to reach North American hinterlands. The answer is the St. Lawrence Seaway system. Alright, the next question is let me think. So okay, we discussed this in the brief answers. Alright. Dash is by far the highest and the most rugged mountains of the Western Highlands. Hint is that they form the easternmost part of the Western Highlands. Okay, so the answer is the Rockies. The Rockies is the answer. Let us go on. Okay. The Great Basin is located between the plateaus of Dash and Dash. Hint is that these altitudes are located at an altitude of 1500 to 3000. These plateaus are located at an altitude of 1500 to 3000. The answer is Colombia and Colorado. Alright, the next one. After we finish, we have Colombia and Colorado. So we are finished with the MCQs of this lesson. Now let us move on to some of the MCQs of the next lesson, which is Indian national movement in the states. Okay. So the first question: dash means peasant lakes. I repeat the question: dash means peasant lakes. Dash means peasant lakes. The answer is Kisan Sabhas. The next question. In Andhra Pradesh, dash mobilized the peasants and formed a Kisan Sabha. The options are Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, or N.G. Ranga. Pretty obvious, you can guess it. You don't need to even think about it. The answer is N.G. Ranga. Next one. The Congress failed to fulfill the promise of dash. I repeat the question. The Congress failed to fulfill the promise of abolition of zamindari. The next question. The first Kathiawar political conference was hosted by dash in dash in dash. Alright, I'll give you a hint. There are three dashes. The answer for one of them is 1921. Find the remaining two. The answer is Rajkot. I was just writing it, trying to, so I can try to find it in a crossword way, but whatever. Rajkot in by Tako Sahib Lakhaji Raj. Then the last MCQ. So the AIKS was found in dash. The options are 1922, 1939, 1942, 1950 and 1937. Sorry, 1936. The answer is 1936. Alright, I think we're done with this lesson. Now let's move on to the next lesson is mineral resources and industries in West and East India. Alright. The first question is Rajasthan produces dash percent of copper. Okay. The answer is 54%. The next question. Where is limestone mined in Assam? The options are Karbi Angalang and Dima Assam. Karbi Angalang and Dima Assam is the first option. The second option is Dima Assam and Lakhimpur. The third option is Barpeta and Darrang. The fourth option is Nagan and Morigan. So the answer is Karbi Angalang and Dima Assam. Okay, so the next question. Dash was banned from visiting Jaipur to preside over a Mandal meeting. Guys, answer. Come on, answer. The answer I know the answer, but then I forgot what question it is. Okay. You didn't even ask a question in the first place. Well, let me just ask you a question. Rajasthan produces dash percent of the gold in India. Rajasthan produces dash percent of the gold in India. Rajasthan produces dash percent of the gold in India. The answer is 25%. Rajasthan produces about 25% of the gold in India. Rajasthan produces about 25% of the gold in India. Okay. Now, let's go on. Rajasthan has dash million tons of manganese resources. Rajasthan has dash million tons of manganese resources. We got an answer. Is it 5.78 million tons? Yes, it is 5.78 million tons. That is correct. Okay, let's go on. Now, Assam is the oldest and India's first oil production well began in dash year, or in the year dash. In Assam, the crude oil production or oil production had been. Oh, sorry. I said it wrong. I just rephrased it on purpose. Yeah, in Assam is the oldest, and the crude oil well began production in dash in the year dash. Okay, I'll give you some options. The options are Digboy 1890, Satara 1922, then Karbi Angalang 1840, and Dimasa 1997. Okay, we got an answer. Digboy 1890. Yes, that is correct indeed. The answer is Digboy 1890. Okay. The next one. Rajasthan has the dash largest livestock population in India. The options are first, fourth, second, fifth. The options are first, fourth, second, fifth. We got an answer from the same person again. Wow. Okay. That is nice. It is. It is of course correct. It is second. Guys, anybody else wanna answer, please? Okay. Now let's go on. Dash has the largest iron resources in Rajasthan or deposits. The options are Bhilwara, Jodhpur, Jaipur, Jaisalmer. The options are Jaipur, Jodhpur, Bhilwara, Jaisalmer. Okay, we got an answer. Oh my god, this dude is spamming. Correct answers. Yes, it is Bhilwara. Yes, this dude is also number one. Guys, any of you buy a super chat? Come on. It's gonna help us. We're gonna promote a lot. Okay. Now, let's go on. After we finish with Bhilwara, we have the next question or the last question of this chapter, which is, I believe this is pretty easy. Dash results in the degradation of land. I should say dash means a fertile land converting into a desert due to the loss of flora and fauna in the region. I repeat, dash is also referred to as a fertile land converting into a desert due to the loss of flora and fauna in the region? Come on, guys, answer. This is completely open. I don't know why am I not? Why can't I create polls? Okay. The answer is desertification. Okay, yeah, wow, he sent it in like about time. The next question, guys, who are all the three people here? I know one of them is the person who's answering a lot. Just reveal yourself in the chat. No one's gonna say anything. Come on. Just comment something or do it. Come on, reveal yourself. Let's move on. Okay, we finished this chapter, of course. So let me just do the ritual cross. Divorce. Let's move on to the next chapter, which is local self-government in India. I'll be ending this stream most probably now. So not now, maybe in a 5 minutes or maybe no. I don't know. Alright guys, so I'll be ending this video now. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time in the next video. Bye bye. Bye guys. Bye guys.